Hello, everybody. This is Baltimore Gonzalez coming to you on this great day of October 20th. Can you believe it's already October 20th? Thanksgiving's coming up, Christmas is coming up. We got some good things around the corner that can also bring some stress, right? So today we're going to be talking about beating burnout and fatigue, and I put "Let's Get Real" in there, and I'll tell you why in a second. And I'm really excited that we have a special guest today, Lucia Aguilar, who is also my clinical supervisor for the housing team New Starts. I'm really excited to have Lucia, and I invited Lucia because in my year and a half with her, she's very person centered and very positive and just very much focused on the positive side of things. And I thought she would be a good addition to today. So I'm glad that she's with us. So again, happy Wellness Wednesday. And to the right, you see today is your day to let go of things that no longer serve you. And that can be every day, right? But if you can just think about that for today, today is your day to let go of things that no longer serve you, whatever that means, for you. I'm not sharing. I apologize. Do I need to start over, Brian? Okay, you guys see that now? Okay, so I do apologize. We are having some technical difficulty just for transparency today. I'm coming to you from home. I haven't done this in a year and a half since the very first one I did. And I'm normally in the studio doing it with Brian. So checking in, how are you guys doing? Um, let's take a moment to just take a deep breath and in through your nose and out through your mouth. And if you're here today, whether it's your first time or you've been a regular, thank you for being here today. And we are going to be talking about beating burnout and fatigue and getting real. And our wrap overview continued. Last month it was about the daily maintenance, and today will be about the stressor triggers that we're probably going to continue on to the next one. And as I said, we have Lucia Aguilar. So why did Baltimore add "Let's Get Real" to this? So I have been to a bunch of burnout, fatigue, compassion fatigue seminars, online and stuff, and they've all been great, mind you. Um, in my personal experience and with something that I've gone through recently, it made me think of the part of "Let's Getting Real" because on in August I had to have a emergency surgery for my gallbladder. So coincidentally, it was the last time that I did a webinar. I was actually sitting doing the webinar in a lot of pain, and by 7 o'clock that evening, I couldn't take it anymore. And what had happened was it was a misdiagnosis over a year ago that I had ulcers, and that my stress would exacerbate them. Well, it turned out that's not what it was. I actually had a bunch of gallstones. Um, so I did go to the I called my doctor that night and said, I'm going to the emergency room. I cannot take this anymore. So they kept me for 3 days and they did emergency surgery. So, okay, great. Gallstones are gone, gallbladder's out. Although a little something funny, I did tell the doctor, I said, well, how much weight am I going to lose from this gallbladder removal? And he says, your gallbladder's about the size of your thumb. And I said, oh, well, that's disappointing. I thought it's going to lose like 15 pounds overnight. So that's a little funny part. So the not so funny part is that this surgery, for some reason, has caused my panic disorder to rear its ugly head. And I've been transparent with you all about my panic disorder and going through it for, since I was about 23 years old and when I went through agoraphobia. So did I add this because I wanted this webinar to be about Baltimore? No, I did not. As always, I'm sharing in hopes of making it a little more normalized and comfortable and creating a safe space for others to share what they're going through. Because if I'm going through something and nobody knows, then there are other people out there who are going through stuff and we don't know. And I think it's imperative that we're conscious of, that person that who's out for 2 weeks or a month or 2 months, that we're very careful not to judge, because we never know what our brothers and sisters out there are going through. I'm not going to belabor you with my story, but I will tell you that this is an ongoing journey that I'm trying to discover and working with my doctor and my psychologist. And I appreciate having a supervisor like Lucia, who has allowed me to create a safe space with her where I can be transparent. But as she reminded me yesterday when we were going through a walkthrough of today, that your supporters can be the people that you're going to, that are going to create that safe space for you. You get to choose who those people are going to be, and it may not, your supervisor may not necessarily be in that realm of supporters. I just happen to be, I'll use the word lucky that I have a supervisor who is. So we do have Lucia. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Lucia, and I'm going to turn off my my slides, Brian. Do we have you, Lucia?
Yes, I'm here.
There we go. Okay, everything okay, Brian, on that end as far as the screenshot? Beautiful. All right, Lucia, thank you so much for being here. For full transparency, we did have an issue where we've already gone through this once, and we're going to do a re-record. And I can say that for some reason, the second time felt a little more exciting to me. I'm not sure why, but it did. So Lucia, thank you so much for having that patience and openness with us today, and knowing that technical stuff does happen, and I'm so excited to hear you speak. As I shared, since I've gone on to your team about 1.5 years ago, there was a gal named Susan Gonzalez that I worked with 23 years ago. She's one of my first supervisors. And you remind me of her in that you're always person-centered and positive, and you always bring it back to that, okay, but what's positive about this, and what are we going to do? And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, so others could experience, you. So if you want to get started on your piece, Lucia, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Baltimore. I'm excited to be here, and I thank you all for that opportunity. So I wanted to speak about whole person self-care, right? I wanted to be able to look at self-care from the perspective of whole person care. One of our major guiding principles and our mission, vision, and values, and how that really applies overall across our department, and how we can use that for ourselves in our own self-care. And more specifically, as you mentioned earlier, to prevent burnout and fatigue. So when looking at whole person self-care, I really looked at both the concepts of holistic or whole body care, as well as wellness and recovery principles. And with holistic whole body care, you're really looking, that in itself, you're looking at the combination of the medical model and more of your complementary methods. So you're looking at both that cultural piece that may be a little different for other people, and how it applies in the context of the medical model, more specifically the bio, psycho, and social model. So how did this come about? Well, I looked at the approach and how it's reflected in our own guiding principles. So the need for us to be aware of the importance of being strength-based, of being person-centered, and more specific, self-driven, right? And then inclusive of our natural supports, and being patient with ourselves and stages of change that we might be at, and our own motivation. So looking at that, I was able to identify that there are different pillars within that. There's mind, body, heart, and emotions, and spirit. And so that's what holistic approaches look at. When you look at the overall concept of the medical model that I was talking about, the biopsychosocial, you're looking at those pillars in a broad perspective. But you're also looking at how our wellness and recovery principles are reflected in that, in terms of when you're looking at bio, you're breaking it down further to your physical wellness, your nutritional wellness. When you break down psychosocial, you're breaking it down in terms of your mind, your heart, your emotions, and your spirit. And then social is looking at, yes, how we interact with other people, but it's also looking at the context in which it happens. So are you in an environment that you can practice that self-care, that you can hold yourself accountable, that you have the support systems in place that can help you be that reminder of the commitment that you're making for yourself?
Yes, definitely.
So, yes. So I wanted to go over some examples in each category. And the reason why, when you look at the holistic view, really think about it in terms of balance. How are you bringing balance to that? So, for example, I may do very well in the social part, or I may do very well in the psychological part, but I may struggle more in the physical part. So then I know that that's an area of improvement for me, and I can have that honest self conversation in terms of what it is that I want to work on. So when you think about psychological and nutritional, I'm sorry, physical and nutritional, you're thinking about things such as meeting your biological needs. So meeting your ability to make sure you're eating well, looking at the food choices that you're making sure you're keeping yourself hydrated, exercising, taking care of yourself in preventative appointments, and then getting enough sleep, which is a big one, right? Because sometimes you don't give yourself enough time, the complete full time that you're needing, right, to sleep. So that's just an example.
And that's huge, I might say. I learned that probably in my late 20s, just how much sleep had a bearing on your mental health, your physical health, being on time to work, those types of things, going to bed earlier. So, yeah, that's a huge one.
Okay, and then thank you for that, Baltimore. You're right. So now when we look at the psychological, the psycho-emotional, and spiritual, you're looking at your safety needs, the needs to feel safe and the need to belong. So you're looking at different activities that you're taking on for yourself. Are you allowing yourself enough time to practice some of your favorite hobbies? Or are you practicing mindfulness? And when we think about mindfulness, traditionally we think about meditation, but it can also be listening to music and being in the here and now in the present moment. It can also be taking a walk, or it could be anything that helps you be attuned to yourself. Practicing gratitude and kindness is another big one in that category. So maybe even keeping like a gratitude journal, or practicing an act of kindness towards somebody or towards yourself. And then practicing that self forgiveness and that self kindness and that self love. Because sometimes we are our own worst enemy, our own worst critic, and our own worst coach, right? Where we're stopping ourselves before we even start. So we're kind of talking ourselves out of it before we've even given ourselves that opportunity. And if that happens, that's okay. That is your automatic response. It's okay to say, wait, is that really me, or what's going on there? And kind of hold that accountability and say, I see you, I hear you, but I'm going to practice forgiveness, kindness, and self love, and I'm going to give myself that opportunity to do different, right? And allow yourself that opportunity to dream and dream big. Give yourself that opportunity to say, I'm going to work on what makes me happy. I'm going to work on what helps me feel good about myself.
Yeah, Lucy, I want to say for a second that when you and I did a run through yesterday, um, when you mentioned about the dream, it got me excited because dreaming, I feel it offers us hope for one. Um, but I am one who believes that you have to have something to look forward to. And whether I'm talking to my friends or myself or the person served or coworkers, it's something I'll always ask is, what is one thing you look forward to today? That could be watching Golden Girls tonight, or that could be what you're going to have for dinner, or it could be what you're going to have for lunch, or going for a walk. It could be anything. You get to choose, but we should have something we look forward to. So when you talked about dreaming, I know for me, oftentimes I dream of going back to San Juan Bautista to the 5-day retreat I went to. That's my happy place, and I dream about that, and so yeah, I think it's really important to have dreams.
Absolutely. The third part is our social needs, right? Our need to feel a sense of belonging, and our need to feel loved and appreciated. So this is where that social part comes in terms of how we relate to other people. So make friends, join a group that has mutual interests, like a painting group or something like a walking group or a hiking group or something. I know right now there might be a need to make some adjustments, but look at anything that's available virtually. There are a lot of options right now virtually. I know with artistic items or activities, there have been different like painting groups that have come about, whether it's with children or whether it's families or whether it's personal, just something that you can not only engage in the activity that you enjoy, but then you are also incorporating other people and you're getting two of your pillars fulfilled, not just one.
Yes.
And then also looking at nurturing your relationships, right? The relationships with other people, and are they nurturing relationships? Allowing them to nurture you as much as you nurture them, right? So is it reciprocated? And that's a big one because I know as mental health professionals, our strength tends to be helpful to other people, to externalize our ability to help and support, right? But it may be a struggle for us to accept that. So being willing to allow other people to nurture you, that's a big one. And at the same time, please don't misunderstand me. I understand that with self-care, it's very, very much about yourself, but then also looking at how that's impacted and in what context. And then creating that sense of support, creating that circle of support that you spoke about earlier, and then growing from there and establishing that broader support system. And that's important too as we look at our natural supports and our ability to do that. So ultimately, the reason for going through those pillars is because I want to focus on that and the importance of that balance. So if you think about it in terms of going to the gym and working out, if you only work out your arms and you don't work out your legs or your core or incorporate cardio in there, there's an imbalance. So sure, you're going to have strong arms, but you may still need to work on other things. What we tend to do is we tend to focus on the areas that we do well and that are our strengths, but we tend to struggle a little bit more on the areas that we have a need in. So I'll use myself as an example. Psychological needs and social needs are probably the best for me. Biological needs, that's an area that I struggle the most, specifically with exercise and the consistency of exercise. But it's something that I'm wanting to do. And the way that the circle of support comes in for me is I surround myself with people that are going to provide me with that gentle reminder of how are you doing with that, Lucia? How's that going for you, right? The last thing I want is somebody who's going to say, well, that's great that you're thinking about walking, but it's a lot better if you put it into action. Well, that's going to automatically discourage me, and trust me, I already am doing that for myself and I'm already having to challenge that voice. So, I want to surround myself with somebody that's going to help reflect, Lucia, that's a commitment you made for yourself. How's that going? Nope, maybe not today. How about, let's check in 3 weeks from now and see how that went for you or how it's going, or maybe not even that long, but maybe 3 days instead of 3 weeks. Anyway, the specifics, those you can figure out later. But the idea is that.
If you don't mind me interrupting you for a second. So it sounds like what I hear you saying is that it's okay when we have asked an accountability partner, hey, can you check in with me in a week or every few days and see if I'm walking? Then we get to choose how or who is going to be checking in with us on that. But we don't just want everybody coming at us saying, well, if you went on your walk today, you'd probably feel better, you know.
Absolutely.
But if it's an accountability partner that we have given permission to ask us, then that makes it a little bit different.
Yes, absolutely. Because they're going to help reinforce that commitment that you made for yourself, right? And it's that ultimately you're taking responsibility for that journey for yourself, for that wellness journey, and you are breaking it out and you're breaking it into steps that are obtainable for you, whatever that may look like. So be willing to identify that for yourself and look at it in terms of a battery, right? You want to keep your battery fully charged. So I know for me, I never want like my headset to ever go past 50% because then I'm going to struggle and the chances that it's going to deplete completely and I'm going to be, struggling with that is going to increase and if I don't just regularly routinely charge it.
Right.
So how do we bring it all together? Why are we going through this? We're going through this as a way of identifying how we can prevent burnout and fatigue. So I know that we talk about our plans, right? Our WRAP plans. This is a type of WRAP plan, but it's a little bit different. So the W for work stands for work towards the balance. Work towards the balance that you want to see for yourself. The R would be recognize. Recognize the areas that you want to improve in, the areas that you want to work on. A, accept. Accept the areas that are already improvements for you and maintain that. And then P, perceive the imbalance not as a criticism, but as communication. It's a way that your body is communicating to you or, however else that there's some areas that, it needs tending to.
Right.
And then ultimately practice the 3 Ps, right? So practice, practice, practice. Practice to meet your biological needs, practice to meet your psychological needs, and practice to meet your social needs. And that's what I have to share with us for you all today.
I love that, Lucia. You reminded me of something that many people who know my story and know that my panic disorder began 23 years ago. Dr. Soto was my psychiatrist, very first ever. And he sat across from me and he said, I want you to do me a favor. And I said, okay. He said, I want you to listen to your body. Your body will tell you that there's something going on. And I want you to, the rest of your life, remember that, to listen to your body. And I'll tell you what, I have never forgot that. So like how you were talking about that whole imbalance, I think it is important that, like if we're responding differently to people than we normally would, or if maybe something's triggering us a little more easier or whatever, to listen to those cues and head back to, like you said, to those 3 pillars and go, okay, where might I need to go back and maybe work a little bit harder at or add something to, so thank you for sharing all of that great information. And as I said, you're a stellar example of strength-based and, positive regard for everybody. And I thank you so much for sharing today.
Thank you, Baltimore. I enjoyed your company.
All right, so glad to have you. And all right, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen again, Brian. Brian, if you could just let me know if you can see this. Huh. Okay, let me try it again. Okay. How about now? Okay. So just to recap on what we went through last time, we started over again because by popular demand, I had a lot of people asking me to just give general overview of WRAP, which is the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And there are parts to that, which is the daily maintenance plan, which we went over in the last seminar, and then stressors, also known as triggers, early warning signs when things are breaking down in the crisis plan. So in the next few months, along with special guests or whatever else we talk about, you'll be getting a little education on RAP. So the 5 key recovery concepts, just to refresh people's memory, or if you already know them, you could say them along with me wherever you're at, is hope, personal responsibility, education, self-advocacy, support. And last month, what we went over were the 3 parts of the daily maintenance, which are describing yourself when you're well. And these are things that you need to do every day to maintain your wellness. And then a list of things that you might need to do on any day. So an example that I like to give is maybe you don't need to take a bath every day, so that becomes number 3. You might want to take a bath to make yourself feel better. But for number 2, you do need to shower every day for yourself. That helps you feel better. One of my favorites, if you listen to your body when it whispers, you won't have to hear it scream. And kind of how I said earlier, if you're starting to maybe snap at people, your emails are starting to bug you, the sound of your phone ringing is just, you want to throw your phone at the wall. Those could be, well, that might not be as gentle, but these could be whispers that you want to listen to and pay attention to, and see what you can do about them in the here and now. And even going back to what Lucia talked about, the pillars, going back and, okay, maybe I need to call a friend, maybe I need to call a supporter. So again, identifying events or triggers, which is what we're going to be going over today. So events or triggers that are, if they happen, might make you feel worse, like an argument with a friend or getting a big bill, then using wellness tools like some of those that Lucia talked about, going for a walk, calling a friend, eating healthy. You develop an action plan you can use to get through this difficult time. There are external upsetting events or circumstances that produce discomfort. Things like family friction, work stress, a baby crying, loud noises may be triggers for you. Let me give you an example. I'm normally a trigger for me is not loud noises. As I shared with you, given that my panic disorder has reared its ugly head, noises are intensified by 10. So if something falls in the next room, it sounds so loud. So when I'm going through something, that can be a trigger. Awareness of these stressors and triggers can help you to prepare ahead for handling these external situations that may make you feel badly or often do. And they might affect you differently. You might feel anxious, sad, confused, worried. You might begin to experience anxiety, panic, discouragement, despair, negative self-talk. So these are normal, but if not dealt with, could cause you to feel worse and worse. And that's the whole point of going over all of this and developing plans, is that, and mind you, you can pull out a notebook. You can put it in your journal. You can email me and ask me for a RAP workbook. But knowing about your susceptibility to triggering events and developing plans to deal with them can help you to cope and avoid feeling worse and worse. So like a few examples of somebody getting triggered: I felt excluded. I felt powerless. I felt unheard. I felt scolded. I felt judged. I felt blamed. I felt like the bad guy. I felt forgotten. I felt unsafe. I felt unloved. I felt like it was unfair. I felt frustrated. And there are so many facets to our life, and there are so many versions of us out there that you are you could be the Fresno County behavioral health employee. You could also be a partner, husband, wife, mother, father, stepmother. In all of these roles, you could be feeling any of these things, so this is not just about work. This is about preventing these bad feelings regardless of where you are. So a person's triggers are activated through one or more of the 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. The senses identified as being the most common to trigger someone are sight and sound, followed by touch and smell, and taste close behind. Close behind. A combination of the senses is identified as well, especially in situations that strongly resemble the original trauma. Although triggers are varied and diverse, there are often common themes. So this is going to be different for everybody because I want to tell you that mine is a feeling. It's not necessarily a smell or something I see. It's a feeling in my body that then makes my mind react and stuff and turns it into anxiety and ultimately a panic attack. So that's different for everybody. So, 5 things are identifying the triggers, avoiding the stress, reaching out, which I think is imperative in staying healthy, is reaching out. Even though most of us, I've heard this from friends, I've heard this from colleagues, we don't want to burden people, we don't want to outdo our welcome, we don't want them to get tired of us. I recently said this to a friend, I will totally admit, for full transparency, I said in tears, she asked how I was doing, and I said, I don't want you to get sick of me, and because of what I'm going through. I was in a very, very emotional space. And she said, ask me if I'm sick of you. And I said, are you sick of me? And she said, no, it's your transparency that makes me love you, Baltimore. She said, and this isn't you all the time. Stop being so hard on yourself. So reach out, even if it's just to chat for 5 minutes. And what I find, I don't know about you guys, but is if I don't always talk and if I listen, it gets me out of my own head. So sometimes listening to other people and what they're going through or how their day was or asking them questions actually gets me out of my own head. Staying busy and keep learning. So those are interesting, right? The staying busy, because, I find a disparity in what we teach people and then what we're also told, which is, okay, stay busy, wash the dishes if you have to. Oh, relax, go meditate, make sure. So I think you have to find that balance of what is comfortable for you, in how much busyness and how much relaxation. Stressors and triggers, identification. So I'll mention that Mary Ellen Copeland Center has really tried to go with the word stressors. Most people identify with the word triggers. And so thinking about your triggers, it's often hard to think of your personal triggers. These triggers are specific to you. They may not be upsetting to other people. You may see a long line at the drive-thru at Starbucks, and it may have you so angry that you want to throw your Frappuccino out the window. But yet the person in front of you is listening to their music and dancing. So triggers are very, very different for everybody. And you can begin the process of identifying your triggers by thinking of times in the past when something has happened that made you feel badly. So you can begin the process of identifying your triggers by thinking of times in the past when something has happened that made you feel badly. So what was it? Were you in a meeting and maybe you felt ignored? And maybe next time you can speak up and say, hey, I'd like to talk. Not saying that we always have to take personal responsibility, but in maybe taking a look at different situations and going, okay, what is triggering? Or that email that I just got that I want to tell them, what's what. What was it about that email? One of my favorites, this too shall pass. I've always had it up in my office. I've always had it up at home. My mom said this to me all the time growing up when something was happening. This too shall pass. And that has never escaped me. And as a very spiritual person, when I hold on to my rosary and I go to sleep, and I tell myself, this too shall pass, it's very refreshing to me and feels safe. So we already talked about this, the 5 senses. So the next part of your RAP plan is going to be your stressors and triggers action plan. So, and this is actually really, really simple if we don't complicate it too much, because stressors and triggers are often something that you can't completely plan for or avoid, right? I was not able to avoid or plan for emergency surgery, which I think I did mention that it was the last webinar that I did. It was that day that I went to the hospital. I was in pain during the webinar, went home, and I was misdiagnosed as it being uh, ulcers because of stress over a year ago. And so it just gave time for these gallbladder stones to get even bigger. And so that's an example of where I was not able to have a plan or to be able to avoid it. I'll tell you what, I have a plan for surgery now, because now I know that possibility is there. So because of this, it helps for you to develop a plan of what you can do if those triggers come up, a plan that can keep these triggers from worsening your overall health and sense of well-being. And I do see there's a missing R in the U. Your stressors and triggers action plan is developed using the items that you listed in your wellness toolbox. So back to the first time we talked about wellness toolbox and some of the stuff that Lucia mentioned today, whether that's walking, drinking, more water, or, doing something in those 3 pillars that makes you feel better. Whatever you decide is in your wellness toolbox, you are the master of you, and you know what works best for you, as far as, your wellness toolbox. So after you make a list of your stressors and triggers, you develop a plan that's going to keep you from feeling worse if that were to happen. So wouldn't this be great if we just had one piece of paper with one trigger? And maybe some people do. You could have as many as you want. And, I had an incident where I was in a training where somebody broke a nail, and she considered that a crisis. And there was a whole conversation afterwards because some didn't see that as a crisis and others did. And what it all came down to is it doesn't matter what anybody else sees as a crisis. What matters is that it's a crisis to you. That is what matters, or that it's a trigger to you. And then you then develop your own personalized action plan, because what we're not doing is creating an action plan that we send out to everybody and say, okay, if you are feeling, mad at a coworker, here's an action plan. No, everybody develops their own. So some examples that people gave of triggers action plan were self-talk, breathing exercises, getting myself grounded. No, it's just a flashback, journaling, asking for help, calling a friend or supporter, leaving an uncomfortable situation if you're in an uncomfortable situation, shut down, don't say a word, that works for somebody, catching your breath. I shared earlier that I wear this around my neck, and it's an apparatus that helps you for mindful breathing that Tashawn Baker introduced to me, and I immediately ordered one, and it's to slow down your breath out, so to help you focus on your breathing. Focus on something pleasurable, maybe like Lucia mentioned earlier about dreaming, and you think about that dream. Figure out why you were triggered, and back to it won't last forever. This too shall pass, which I think is really important in having those other things aligned, because, using myself as an example again, if I've got my doctors aligned and my supporters aligned, and I know that I'm doing everything that I have to, then when I lay down my head, I have more faith that it's not going to last as long as I think it may, and that it is going to pass more quickly than I think it might, if that makes sense. So, almost lastly, when you connect with people who are good for you, you feel it. You feel it. This is a big deal. Don't forget to acknowledge how great it is to be around someone who lights you up. Tell them, even if you feel a little weird, your people love your weirdness. Your people. So the people that are going to maybe become your supporters, or who are are going to appreciate when you tell them, um, that they are a nice light to be around, that they make you feel good to be around. So again, when you connect with people who are good for you, you feel it. Pay attention and even put that in your wrap plan. Add a piece of paper. People that I feel good being around. People that make me feel safe. However you want to word it. And that is the end of our presentation for today. I want to give a special thanks to Lucia Aguilar, my supervisor, for joining us. And I want to thank everybody for their patience with our technical difficulties today. It happens, and that's part of wellness, and everything else, right, is going with the flow and not letting something become, bigger than it is. And thank you to Brian Bishop, and we will see you next time. You have a great, fabulous, happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope this finds you in great health and good spirits.